especially the visitor, the Pro-Chancellor, the Chancellor, members of staff, past Vice Chancellors of university, fellow professors, our lecturers, the students of Cool, and ladies and gentlemen. Today, the emphasis is on the pre-convocation lecture to be given by Professor Abubakar Rashid, who was a former Vice Chancellor of Bayero University and former Executive Secretary of NUC. This man, at the beginning of the idea, the conception of this university, he helped nurture this idea that has been translated into action today. And we want to celebrate and welcome him here as Wande Nonamba, a brother in another town. Oduko Namba is a very rare gem, a man who cherished the idea of partnership, of collaboration in education. He thought that the government universities were doing their job, but they need to have some hands that collaborate. Not that compete, but that can help, so that the goal of education, and they call it a kind of education, a kind of knowledge that is translated into rules of action. And such knowledge, when translated into rules of action, create communities where people nurture values that make persons and communities flourish. The idea we started when we came to your office, that looked as if it was impossible. Today we are happy to share with you that that work in progress has become a reality. It was so sympathetic. He didn't dwell on our deficiencies, on our weaknesses. He saw the future through us. That through the Claretian University, one of those institutions that will add to the progress of mankind was in the making. And today we are proud to welcome you, sir, and to thank you for your graciousness, and to say that the trust you placed in us was great, and that faith continues. We are a faith-based university where people interact, share ideas, where the values of mankind are identified within the community of meaning shared by everyone. We have a Nigeria that is broke because we don't understand, but with the kind of values faith-based university will give, like he conceived, such values will bind hearts, bind communities, bring peoples together, and give students the kind of education that will make them to form a nation, even though tribes may differ, but we are of one stock. So I want to welcome you, sir, and thank you on behalf of our brothers that you are one of us. You are our mentor. You trusted us. You saw the best in us. You saw the future we didn't see. And today we thank you and say that collaboration which you visioned, that with the grace of God, the Claretian University will continue to push forward. And there are greater challenges, certainly, in the future. But we have great hope that we will go further to satisfy and to realize the good for our nation. So, having said this, I will ask you to take it easy. He will be unveiled, and then listen to him and enriched by the wealth of his knowledge as an administrator, an intellectual, as a father, as an academic. Thank you very much.
We are securing the future through education. That's our motto, that's our mantra in this university. Distinguished gentlemen, we are moving according to time, may I quickly, with all dignity, invite the Deputy Executive Secretary of National Universities Commission to please come forward, our own dear brother, Mr. Kuki, and tell us who the guest lecturer is. Let's put our hands together for him to do the needful, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, MC. The Chancellor, one of our shining lights, distinguished Senator Jack Teligado, the Honorable Commissioner of Higher Education here representing the government of Imo at the highest level, the Vice Chancellor, principal officers, staff and students of this vibrant, emerging university, members of the clergy, my Lord spiritual and temporal, members of the fourth estate of the realm. Good afternoon. Chancellor, sir, I'd like to start by placing on record that my joy knows no bounds as I have the singular honor of being called upon to introduce one of my favorite personalities, a towering figure whose antecedents, whose accomplishments, whose lifestyle we have followed and understudied with keen and positive influence. A mentor who has lived a life of distinction and fulfillment, building institutions and transforming lives with an unshakable conviction and such staunchness of purpose. An icon of humanity who will remain at the heart of humanity long after his God-given time on earth. Baba Rashid, for all that you have stood for and for all that you continue to represent in our national life, in our individual lives, and all the other lives that you have touched, only God Almighty can reward you, sir. May I, in keeping with the convention, kindly request our convocation lecturer to remain standing while I read his citation. I thought you will welcome him with a rousing. Chancellor, friends, colleagues, it is my honor and privilege to present to you our distinguished guest lecturer for this convocation ceremony. A renowned academic, a renowned public intellectual and visionary university leader whose career has spanned over 4 decades of dedicated service to education and national development. Professor Abubakar Adamu Rashid, MNI, MFR, FNAL, began his academic journey at Bayero University, Kano, before pursuing further studies at the University of Nottingham in the United Kingdom, and then the prestigious Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. He holds a Bachelor of Arts, 2 master's degrees, and a doctorate, all in different branches of English studies, attesting to his deep intellectual breadth and scholarly versatility. Professor Rashid began his university teaching career at Bayero University, Kano in July 1981, rose subsequently to the rank of senior lecturer and became head of the Department of English and European Languages in October 1990, In 1993, he took a leave of absence to serve the nation in the media sector, first as editor of the New Nigerian newspapers and subsequently as manager of the capital in 1995. Leading voice in Nigeria. In 1999, he returned to the university, resuming his academic duties with renewed vigor. His ascent in academic leadership continued steadily. He became Dean of the Faculty of Arts, then Deputy Vice Chancellor from 2010 to 2015. He served with distinction as Vice Chancellor of Bayero University, Kano. I dare anyone here to visit Bayero University, Kano, and you will have on-the-spot assessment of the impact that this man made in that university. He's actually acclaimed to be the father of modern Bayero University, Kano. Also in early 2014, he was appointed Pioneer Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of the Governing Council of Sule Lamido University, Kafin Hausa in Jigawa State. I mean, that's the state-owned university named Sule Lamido University. In 2016, he was entrusted with the highest regulatory office in Nigerian higher education as Executive Secretary and Chief Executive of the National Universities Commission. This was a position he held with distinction until June 2023, when he voluntarily stepped down to return to the classroom and continue mentoring future generations of scholars. And here, it was me that had the singular honor, following that unforeseen circumstance of the departure of Professor Abubakar Adamu Rashid. And I must add here that it is unheard of, it is actually inconceivable that a Nigerian who has finished his first term, who has just begun his second term, and calls me up to his office and said, Chris, it's time is up, I'm done here, and I'm returning back to the classroom with about 3 and few months left on his tenure. Only Professor Abubakar Adamu Rashid can do this. Professor Abubakar Adamu Rashid, belongs to that celebrity class that continues to bring prestige and respect to the classroom, to the corridor of power, and to the practice. He was, at various times, a member of the governing councils of Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, University of Jos, Kaduna State University, and the National Institute for Nigerian Languages based in Aba in Abia State. He was also a member of the Board of Trustees of the TED Fund, as well as a member of the governing board of the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board. An avid, lifelong learner, he enriched his leadership credentials through advanced executive programs at some of the world's leading institutions, including the Harvard Business School, the Harvard Graduate School of Education, the Columbia Business School, and the Said Business School at the University of Oxford. He is also a proud alumnus of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, where he belonged to the elite Senior Executive Course 30 and served as its Monitor General of his cohort. Beyond administration, Professor Rashid has remained active in academic discourse, delivering numerous convocation lectures across Nigeria and leading high-level strategy retreats for top university leadership in both Nigeria and most other countries in the West African sub-region. His insights into education, governance, and public policy are widely respected and continue to shape the evolution of the Nigerian university system. He has published widely in the fields of stylistics, systematic grammar, and discourse linguistics, as well as in higher education policy and university management. He's a recipient of many numerous awards, including honorary doctorate degrees from Pamo University in Port Harcourt, Godfrey Okoye University, and Adeleke University in Ede, He's a fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Letters, a fellow of the Linguistic Association of Nigeria, and a fellow of English Studies Association of Nigeria. He is married, happily married, and blessed with 5 children, 4 of whom are also pursuing careers in academia, a testament to his enduring legacy of scholarship, mentorship, and excellence. Mr. Chancellor, sir, distinguished invited guests, I now have the distinct honor and the rare privilege of introducing and inviting our guest lecturer, our convocation lecturer, Professor Abubakar Adamu Rashid, a humanist, a consummate university administrator, an astute, a highly respected Nigerian, a family man of no mean standard. Thank you, sir, and congratulations for accepting this honorable tax. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Please be seated, sirs and ma'ams. Thank you very much, Mr. Chris Miyagi. The Chancellor, sir, the chairman of this occasion, the Vice Chancellor, visiting Pro-Chancellors, Vice Chancellors, top government functionaries, distinguished invited guests, graduating students, ladies and gentlemen. It is with profound gratitude and deep personal satisfaction that I stand before this distinguished gathering to deliver the first convocation lecture of Claretian University of Nigeria, Maryland, Nekede. To be part of this historic occasion is both an honor and a homecoming of sorts. My association with this young but visionary university dates back to its formative years when, as Executive Secretary of the National Universities Commission, I had the privilege of facilitating the processes that culminated in its licensing by the federal government in 2021. I recall with admiration the commitment, faith, and perseverance of the Claretian congregation in pursuing this noble vision, a vision anchored in the firm belief that education, guided by faith and animated by values, remains humanity's best and surest path to freedom, enlightenment, enduring democracy, and national progress. I recall that the congregation was then led by its provincial superior, Most Reverend Simeon Nwobi, now Bishop of Ahiara, who actually collected the provisional certificate of the university. Let me also commend the current provincial superior of the congregation for his active role in translating their collective vision into reality. Most importantly, I must single out for commendation Reverend Father Professor Wens Madu, the Vice Chancellor of the Young University, for his tireless efforts in pushing NUC to accelerate the process of licensing the university in spite of some glaring shortcomings associated with finances and infrastructure deficits at the beginning of their application. Similarly, Bishop Dashalem Hillary, who unfortunately is not here with us today, but who has become the Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of Council of this university, as well as my good friend and ally, Chief Dr. Ambassador Mr. Chris Mayagi, the then Deputy Executive Secretary at the National Universities Commission. They played key roles in supporting Reverend Father Amadu's laudable efforts. It is a moment of pride and honor, therefore, that within a period of 4 years, the Claretian University is now celebrating the first set of its well-trained graduates. Hardly any other university in Nigeria born at the same time as Claretian has surpassed this feat. Actually, most of them are in their second year, or they don't even know where they are. The graduating students and their teachers, as well as the leadership of the Claretian congregation, deserve commendation for their commitment, dedication, and perseverance. Mr. Chancellor, sir, the convocation ceremony of any university is a moment of reflection and renewal. It marks both an ending and a beginning, the culmination of years of intellectual toil for graduating students and the reaffirmation of the university's social and moral contract with society. For our first convocation, however, the symbolism runs even deeper. It is a declaration of identity, a public affirmation that the institution has arrived, ready to contribute to the advancement of knowledge, service, and the national development. The Claretian University, Maryland, through this inaugural convocation, therefore, joins the distinguished community of universities across the world that see education not merely as an enterprise of learning, but as a sacred trust, a commitment to the promotion of the common good. The topic assigned to me for this lecture, education, values, and the public good, private universities as partners in national development, is inspired by both the ideals of this faith-based institution and the present realities of our national context. This topic invites us to reflect on three interlocking ideas that define the purpose of education. Education itself is understood as the systematic pursuit of knowledge and the cultivation of intellect. Then values are to be seen as the moral and ethical foundations that give meaning and direction to knowledge. And then public good as the collective welfare of society that education is ultimately meant to serve. In contemporary Nigeria, the question of how education serves the public good becomes increasingly urgent. Challenges confronting our nation, from insecurity and economic inequality to leadership deficit and social fragmentation, cannot be solved by political or economic reforms alone. They demand a moral and intellectual renaissance rooted in the values of integrity, hard work, compassion, and service to humanity. Universities, whether public or private, secular or faith-based, are uniquely positioned to lead this renaissance. They are the crucibles where minds are formed, values are cultivated, and the future of nations are shaped. It is in this context that the role of universities, private universities, particularly faith-based ones, deserve renewed attention. Over the past 2.5 decades, these institutions have expanded access, diversified academic offerings, and introduced new standards of discipline and efficiency into Nigeria's higher education landscape. Yet, their deeper promise lies not in merely expanding capacity, but in reorienting the purpose of education itself by restoring the moral dimension that has often been overshadowed by materialism and utilitarian thinking. Good private universities all over the world are expected to commit to the ideals of the public good. This lecture seeks to explore how private universities, inspired by mission, guided by values, and operating within a national policy framework, can become strategic partners in advancing the public good. It will examine their evolution, contributions, challenges, and the reforms needed to strengthen their impact. Ultimately, the lecture argues that the true measure of a university is not only the number of graduates it produces, but the quality of the values it nurtures and the degree to which it contributes to the moral and intellectual renewal of society. I move to the issue of public good and the moral purpose of education. The idea of education as a public good is one of the most enduring principles of human civilization. From the ancient academies of Greece, particularly Plato's Academy, to the modern universities in Europe, Asia, and Africa, education has always been viewed not merely as a private possession or a means to individual advancement, but as a collective resource that sustains the moral and intellectual fabric of society. Aristotle reminds us in his classic Politics that the fate of empires depends on the education of youth. While many centuries later, the American philosopher, pragmatist, and education reformer John Dewey would argue that education is the fundamental method of social progress and reform. Both thinkers, though separated by millennia, converge on a timeless truth that education serves its highest purpose when it advances the welfare of all. In Nigeria, however, the moral vision of education has often been eclipsed by a utilitarian approach that prizes certificates over competence and individual success over collective responsibility. The result has been an erosion of values, a growing disconnect between learning and character, between education and service. Yet, as history demonstrates, nations that have achieved greatness have always grounded their education system in moral purpose. Japan's post-war reconstruction, South Korea's modernization, and Singapore's transformation from poverty to prosperity were all underpinned by value-based education systems, emphasizing discipline, integrity, and civic duty. Similarly, the early universities of Europe, Bologna, Paris, and Oxford, were founded not merely to transmit knowledge, but to cultivate virtue and leadership in the service of society. And you know, all these universities share something in common with Claretian. They are all founded by holy men like Madhu. Even in Africa, traditional systems of education are holistic, or were holistic. They taught not only skills, but moral responsibility, community solidarity, and respect for life. For Nigeria to realize her enormous potential, her education system must recover this moral compass. Education must once again be recognized as a moral and social covenant, not merely an economic transaction. Schools and universities must become arenas where character is formed alongside intellect, where students learn not only to compete, but to contribute, and where knowledge is valued not merely for its market utility, but for its power to uplift the moral and ethical values of society. The public good that education must serve is not abstract. It is the concrete reality of national peace, social justice, responsible citizenship, and sustainable development. In this sense, every educated person owes a debt to the community, and every university bears a public trust. Whether public or private, secular or faith-based, universities exist to extend the boundaries of knowledge and to humanize the knowledge through values. Faith-based universities in particular are uniquely positioned to restore this balance. By integrating faith, reason, and service, they remind the nation that education without values is empty, and knowledge without conscience is dangerous. The Claretian University's founding philosophy, rooted in the ideals of the Claretian order, which uphold knowledge in the service of humanity, represents a vital corrective to the drift of education away from its moral foundations. It is therefore appropriate at this convocation to reaffirm that the ultimate purpose of education is not merely to make a living, but to make a life worth living. It is to cultivate citizens who embody honesty, compassion, and a sense of duty. It is to cultivate, for in the end, no nation can rise above the moral quality of its educated class, and no education system can endure if it fails to nurture virtue alongside intellect. Now, let me briefly touch on the rise of private universities in Nigeria. The story of private universities, in many ways, is a story of policy evolution, the gradual recognition by Nigerian state that the public sector alone could no longer carry the burden of expanding access to higher education. From the late 1970s through to 1990s, Nigeria witnessed a paradox. While the demand for university education grew exponentially, the capacity of public institutions remained stagnant. By the mid-90s, fewer than 40 federal and state universities were struggling to absorb hundreds of thousands of qualified applicants each year. The result was mass exclusion, overcrowded classrooms, dilapidated infrastructure, and a steady decline in quality. It was against this backdrop that the idea of private participation in higher education began to gain renewed attention. Although privately owned institutions had briefly existed in the 60s, they were dissolved following the promulgation of Decree number 19 of 1974, which vested exclusive control of schools in the federal and state governments. The liberalization of university education began in earnest in the 1990s, driven by three interrelated forces. One, the urgent need to expand access and relieve pressure on public universities. 2, the recognition that higher education, while a public good, could be delivered through public-private partnerships. And 3, the rise of private and faith-based universities worldwide as engines of innovation, ethics, and entrepreneurship. Therefore, following sustained advocacy from scholars, professional associations, and religious authorities in the country, the legal framework for private universities was introduced through the amended Decree number 9 of 1993. The National Universities Commission was subsequently empowered to regulate the establishment of private universities and ensure their compliance with national minimum standards. In 1999, with the advent of civilian rule, the private university movement gained real momentum. That year, the federal government under President Olusegun Obasanjo approved the first set of licensed private universities, Babcock, Madonna, and Ibn Idian, marking a historic shift from monopoly to pluralism. Since then, the subsector has grown remarkably. As at the beginning of this week, that is Monday this week, I was able to confirm from the NUC. I called the ES to confirm, and he told me that Nigeria now, and that is as at this week, has a total of 312 universities, comprising 74 federal, 70 state-owned, and 168 licensed private universities. I say licensed because there are over 500 applications currently receiving treatment at various levels. The private universities vary widely in ownership, mission, and scale, ranging from entrepreneurial models to faith-based institutions such as Godfrey Okoye, Covenant, Bowen, Babcock, Veritas, and now Claretian University, Owerri. Collectively, these institutions have accounted for a significant share of enrollment growth in the past 2 decades, relieving pressure on public universities while introducing new standards of governance and accountability. So I will very briefly touch on the relationship between the private universities and the ethics of public good. The concept of public good in higher education transcends ownership. It is not the exclusive responsibility of the state, but a moral idea shared by all those educational institutions, public or private, that are committed to advancing knowledge in the service of humanity. According to UNESCO, education is a collective endeavor for the common good, rooted in values that sustain both individual flourishing and societal well-being. In this sense, private universities carry a social contract no less compelling than that of their public counterparts. That is to educate citizens, to promote justice, and to nurture virtue. The following points need to be factored in when assessing the laudable contributions of private universities to public good here in Nigeria. I will very briefly mention them. Faith-based universities as moral communities. Everybody knows the good work the faith-based universities are making. I also end that section by saying St. Anthony Mary Claret, the founder of the Claretian Order, insisted that education is not complete until it transforms the heart as well as the mind. That moral vision remains urgently relevant today. The other point to note is the universities as laboratories of citizenship. This is important because we have lost touch with the main essence of university in our country. We have forgotten that universities, one of their major functions is for them to serve as laboratories for citizenship and to bring together people. I remember in the 70s when I was an undergraduate student, or I would say in the 60s when the chancellor was an undergraduate student at Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, where in our rooms, in a room of 2 or a room of 4 or in the dining area, there was no question of this being a Yoruba or Igbo, Tiv, Idoma, Fulani, Hausa. We were all students, we were all friends, we were all eating together, attending classes together, helping one another, and we forged relationships. Unfortunately, today, that responsibility, we seem to be forgetting it. So I hope the Claretian University will try to continue to integrate community outreach as it has started and volunteerism into its academic experience, nurturing what can be called the educated citizen as servant leader. In an age of social fragmentation and corruption, such civic education is indispensable. A nation seeking good governance must first cultivate good citizens, and that cultivation begins in classrooms and in campuses. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, private universities are indeed partners in national development. They contribute to public good through research, innovation, and human capital development. Though relatively young, they are beginning to play a growing role in applied research, ICT, agriculture, and entrepreneurship. The NUC in 2023 noted that private universities now contribute significantly to Nigeria's postgraduate enrollment and are becoming hubs for social innovation. In this sense, private universities will complement the public system rather than compete with it. They are partners in nation building, bringing diversity, efficiency, moral capital into the higher education ecosystem. A future collaboration through research consortia, staff exchanges, and quality assurance partnerships between private universities and public universities will further strengthen this synergy. Now, service as the highest expression of learning. Finally, I say under this section, the ethic of public good finds its most tangible expression in active service. It is a well-known fact that service transforms knowledge into compassion and the intellect into action. Many private universities, especially faith-based ones, have made community engagement a defining feature of their mission. From rural health projects to civic education campaigns, they demonstrate that education's ultimate purpose is not self-promotion, but social transformation. Claretian University's motto, knowledge for service, encapsulates this philosophy. It calls upon its community to view learning as both a privilege and a responsibility. In doing so, it affirms a timeless truth that the educated person is not measured by what he knows, but by what he gives. Viewed from this perspective, private universities are not merely producers of higher education. they are moral agents of social renewal. By embedding the ethics of public good into their institutional culture, they offer Nigeria a blueprint for rehumanizing education and rebuilding public trust in the university as a pillar of civilization. Now, challenges and prospects of private universities. While the rise of private universities represents one of the most transformative developments in Nigeria's higher education landscape, it has also brought to light a complex wave of challenges that must be addressed if their contribution to the public good is to be sustained and deepened. The progress achieved so far, remarkable as it is, remains fragile unless undergirded by strong policy support, sound governance, and a shared national vision for higher education. I say perhaps the most immediate challenge facing private universities is financial sustainability. Unlike their public counterparts, which draw significant funding from the federal and state budgets, private universities, especially the secular ones, rely almost exclusively on tuition fees and donations. This dependence places immense pressure on students and their families and often limits access to only those who can afford high fees. The World Bank in 2017 has observed that the private higher education across sub-Saharan Africa tends to favor the middle and upper classes, thereby reproducing social inequality rather than reducing it. This tension between sustainability and equity calls for creative solutions. Faith-based institutions, for example, can strengthen scholarship schemes and alumni-given programs to support indigent students. Partnerships with industry, philanthropic foundations, and international agencies could also help in diversifying the funding sources. Ultimately, the goal should be to make private education not an exclusive preserve of the privileged, but an inclusive platform for all who seek excellence. Now, this is a very important point because the biggest criticism against private university is that it is for special people, those who have money, those who can pay. And if private universities maintain this and keep recruiting their students from only one source, socio-economic group, then the universities will lose touch, will lose their own sense of value and humanity. A university should be a kind of a melting pot. Everybody should be there, the rich and the poor, the young and the not so young. But the issue of intelligent, brilliant, but indigent students should not be left roaming on the streets simply because their parents have no money. So I'm sure this does not happen and will not happen in Claretian. It will not. But I'm talking now for other universities where clearly the tuition is beyond the reach of most Nigerians. So those who cannot and who cannot even dream to get into those universities or their children will only find ways and means of running down those institutions. They will find ways and means of criticizing, of running down such institutions. And therefore, it will be in the interest of public good if certain percentage of admissions are reserved for indigent from very poor families who cannot afford to pay anything. but someone who is rich in the church can afford to pay for 10 people or 20 people, the church itself and others, so that the university will begin to draw from the pool of the entire nation rather than restricting itself. And I remember inaugural address of Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, in 1961. One of the places, paraphrasing him, is saying, if the many who are poor cannot be saved by the few who are rich, then those who are rich will not be saved by the many who are poor. In other words, let us see that school fees alone does not determine the criteria for entry. The university, every private university in Nigeria should reserve some spaces for, it can be highly competitive, very competitive, but for the very brilliant ones to come in. The next section is dealing with research capacity and academic culture. And of course, it is very interesting that many universities, like Redeemers, we all know that Redeemers University, their center for no, it is biological, it is genetics. Genetics has been acknowledged as a leading center of excellence in Africa. So this good practice should be targeted by younger universities like the Claretian. One area where we all have problems in the private university is the issue of staff development and brain retention. It's a major challenge. Many private universities struggle to attract and retain qualified academic staff, largely due to financial limitations and the rapid expansion of the system. The situation is exacerbated by brain drain as young and brilliant skilled academics migrate abroad in search of better opportunities. To address this, private universities must learn to invest in human capital development through staff training, sabbatical exchanges, and joint appointment with public institutions. And in the case of Claretian, with this convocation tomorrow, which we have started now, Claretian can be prepared to start mounting postgraduate programs in masters and PhDs. And this is, yes, this is one way. This is one way of recruiting young academics and training them at home, and that will be the surest way of retaining them. If you recruit them and send them away somewhere, you are not likely to get them back. So the challenge of mission drift, I say a subtler, but no less critical challenge, is what might be called mission drift. The gradual erosion of founding ideals under the pressures of commercialization and competition. For faith-based universities especially, the temptation to emulate secular models of prestige and profit can dilute their moral distinctiveness. The UNESCO report on higher education warns against this global trend, urging universities to reclaim their public purpose and moral voice. The Claretian universities and others like Godfrey Okoye, Babcock, Veritas, Summit, Covenant must therefore guard against losing the values that justify their existence. Their strength lies in their ethical clarity, in offering education that is humane, inclusive, and transformative. Fidelity to mission must remain non-negotiable, because once a university loses its soul, No amount of infrastructure can redeem it. So prospects for the future. Despite these challenges, the prospects for private universities in Nigeria are very bright. They have proven their viability, resilience, and relevance. They have filled a crucial gap in access, pioneered innovation in governance, and restored a sense of order and purpose to higher education. With continued policy support, increased collaboration with public universities, and stronger linkages with industry and global partners, private universities can emerge, along with their public counterparts, as drivers of Nigeria's knowledge economy. The next frontier lies in deepening impact, fostering research networks, expanding access through digital learning, and strengthening community engagement. Above all, the future belongs to those institutions that can combine excellence with ethics, innovation with integrity, and knowledge with compassion. In this regard, Claretian University's faith-based heritage offers a powerful compass. By holding fast to its motto, knowledge for service, it can help lead a renaissance in Nigerian higher education, one that unites the moral energy of faith with the intellectual rigor of science, and the efficiency of private enterprise with the inclusiveness of the public good. Now I come to recommendations, some policy recommendations for strengthening private universities as partners in national development. I say if private universities are to fulfill their transformative promise, they must be strengthened through strategic reforms that enhance their quality, equity, and moral impact. The following recommendations addressed to government, regulatory bodies, proprietors, and development partners flow logically from the analysis in the preceding sections. They aim to consolidate the gains, correct weaknesses, and chart a sustainable path for the future of higher education in Nigeria. 1, deepen policy support and regulatory partnership. Now, the government, federal government through the NUC, should evolve a collaborative regulatory model that promotes innovation while safeguarding standards. Regulation must be firm but facilitative, ensuring that universities meet academic benchmark while enjoying sufficient freedom to pursue creative models of teaching, research, and community engagement. Such an approach requires consultative policy making. The NUC's periodic summit with vice chancellors, proprietors, and quality assurance experts should be institutionalized as platforms for co-creating solutions rather than imposing compliance. Faith-based institutions with their unique ethos should have dedicated policy forums to address issues of mission integrity, access, and social responsibility. Then expanding access through innovative financing. To make private universities more inclusive, Nigeria must adopt innovative financing mechanisms that reduce the financial burden on students. The Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NEL Fund, should be open to students in both public and private universities, thereby helping to democratize access. In addition, faith-based institutions could establish education trust funds or community endowments to subsidize tuition for disadvantaged but brilliant students, as I have argued earlier. Number 3, third recommendation, invest in staff development and academic excellence. I have already posed that, but I say faith-based universities in particular can leverage their moral communities to nurture staff who are not only competent, but ethically grounded. As Dewi argued, education flourishes when teachers embody the very values they seek to impart. The moral example of educators is in itself a lesson in citizenship. Number 4, reaffirm the moral mission of faith-based universities. The survival and distinctiveness of faith-based universities depend on their fidelity to their mission. These institutions must resist the pressures of commercialization and prestige competition that risk eroding their spiritual identity. Their founders' vision to educate for character, conscience, and community must remain the compass guiding all decisions. To this end, governing councils should ensure that ethics, service, and leadership education remain central to curricula, and that campus life reflects values of compassion, integrity, and social responsibility. The Claretian University's commitment to knowledge for service exemplifies this ideal. Then, foster synergy between public and private universities. As I've said, we shouldn't see private universities as rivals of public universities or vice versa. They are complementing each other. We here in Nigeria, they are complementing one another, and they should foster closer synergy between them to help this country. Now, conclusion. Mr. Chancellor, sir, as we gather to celebrate the first convocation of Claretian University of Nigeria in Maryland, Nekede, Owerri, Imo State, we do more than honor academic success. We celebrate a vision, the conviction that university education, when guided by values, can transform both the individual and the nation. This institution, founded on the Claretian ideals of faith and service, stands as a living testimony or a living testament to the enduring belief that education remains humanity's most powerful instrument for renewal. Or, as Nelson Mandela famously said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. This quote emphasizes that education is not a physical weapon, but a tool for profound socio-economic transformation, helping individuals to overcome oppression, improve their livelihoods, and develop the critical thinking and other skills needed to build a better world. Throughout this lecture, we have reflected on education as both a moral and civic enterprise. We have seen that private universities, especially the faith-based ones, have emerged not as competitors to the public system, but as partners in nation building, complementing government efforts through innovation, discipline, and value-driven leadership. Their strength lies not only in their efficiency, but in their moral purpose, their capacity to educate for character, conscience, and citizenship. In reaffirming the public good of the ultimate goal of education, we have drawn on the wisdom of thinkers from Aristotle to Dewey. Aristotle's reminder that the fate of nations depends on the education of youth, and Dewey's insight that democracy is sustained by education grounded in moral and civic values remain as true today as ever. For Nigeria, a country yearning for peace, justice, and effective leadership, the cultivation of moral intelligence is as vital as the pursuit of economic growth. Faith-based universities, private universities, thus carry a dual mandate: to expand access to knowledge and to restore the soul of education. They must resist the global drift towards marketization, preserving their founding ideals of service, community, and faith. Their success will not be measured by the number of graduates alone, but by the quality of the values they nurture and the integrity of the morally conscious leaders they produce. For policymakers, this lecture has explained that educational reform is national reform. Every investment in knowledge is an investment in peace, productivity, and the moral health of the nation. The nation must therefore create an enabling environment in which both public and private universities can thrive, guided by standards, supported by policy, and united by a shared commitment to the public good. To the 2025 graduating students of Claretian University, this moment marks the beginning of your lifelong service to humanity. The degrees you will receive tomorrow are not medals or privilege, but instruments of service. You are expected to use your learning not for personal advancement alone, but to light the path for others to follow. As Dewey reminds us, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. Let your lives reflect that truth. May the Claretian University continue to grow in health, in wealth, in wisdom, faith, and service. May it remain a place where knowledge is pursued with humility, truth is spoken with courage, and learning is dedicated to the common good. And may its graduates, imbued with intellect and conscience, go forth to heal divisions, build institutions, and renew hope in our nation. For in the final analysis, the strength of a nation lies not in its natural resources, but in the character of its educated citizens. Education is and will always remain the highest expression of hope, the bridge between what we are and what we can yet become. I once more congratulate the graduating students, their parents and families, as well as the teaching and non-teaching staff of this small but strategically conceived university. I also congratulate the Claretian Congregation of Nigeria for its vision, dedication, and commitment towards building a credible faith-based institution of higher learning in Nigeria. I commend the Chancellor and the Convocation, the Pro-Chancellor and the Governing Council, the Vice-Chancellor and the Senate, as well as the entire staff and students of the institution for what is obviously a promising beginning. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.